Hi everyone, welcome to Masterclass BC. Today we are extremely lucky to be speaking with one of the most sought after piano teachers in Western Canada in Washington, international concert pianist Dr. Sasha Starcevich. And we are going to ask him a few questions about three really important parts to learning a new piece of music. So hello Sasha, how are you?
Doing well. Happy to be speaking with you.
Oh, thank you so much for speaking to us again. I know you're very busy and you've got musical engagements all over the world all the time. So thank you very much for taking the time. It's very generous of you.
It's my pleasure.
So there's three areas that I think are really sort of crucial, I guess, to getting pieces ready for performance that not only do pianists worry about, but all musicians. And I just wanted to ask you some questions about those. So those would be like when you're starting out with a new piece, how you're using your practice time at home, and of course, the first steps to properly memorizing a piece. So if you don't mind, we could start out with the first one. When a student is starting out with a piece, what are the first important steps? Obviously we don't want to just jump in, hands together, or not really looking at the whole piece before we start. So do you have any sort of things that you like your students to do when they're very first starting a piece?
Yes, absolutely. I encourage the students to listen to several recordings of the piece beforehand to get a sense of the style and to get a sense of the musical message. And normally I would just provide a list of some great artists that I feel particularly strong with that repertoire. And also I encourage them to do a little historical background on the piece as well. In today's world we have the internet and we have so many resources that it's really a crime not to use them and to gain a good basic understanding of the task that we're going to undertake. And then once we have an idea of what our goal is, then the next step is really probably reading it a couple of times just to get a general feeling for it, and then the hard work starts right away. I usually like my students to learn the piece very methodically right from the very beginning. I find that learning a little bit slower and taking the hands apart, taking sections apart of the piece, really helps to ingrain good habits from the very beginning. More often than not, pieces are learned too quickly and haphazardly, and then that is really what causes a lot of the problems later on when we're trying to polish it.
Because you don't really know the piece very well at all when you thought you did.
Yeah, I think that, learning a piece of music involves not only our brain, but also the messages that the brain sends to the body and the arms and the hands, and our whole being has to kind of integrate into what we're learning. So it's a slow process and it shouldn't be rushed.
So do you always have your students start out in a place other than the very beginning, or do you usually just go from beginning to end when you're first looking at the whole thing?
It really depends on the piece of music. If I find that there are going to be some technical challenges that are quite difficult, I will assign customized exercises that I develop to work on certain passages before tackling the piece as a whole. But as a rule, with every student, I insist to hear the piece without any pedal in a very slow tempo, each hand separately, so that I can work out fingering and I can get a sense of where the difficulties are going to be. I used to have books with fingering in them, and I would just give them to students, but I learned from experience that every hand is different and every student is different. So I constantly am changing fingerings and ways to attack certain passages to customize to the individual student.
Okay, so I guess that kind of leads into the next question anyways. What do you hope that your students are doing when they're at home practicing? How do you want them to spend their practice time, or what do you hope that they're not doing when they're practicing at home?
Well, I hope, let's start with what I hope they're not doing, which is playing without the music and playing quickly too soon. I like to assign certain practice methods, which involve technical exercises, like I said, that are customized, slow metronome speeds that gradually increase. I think the metronome is an invaluable tool in the beginning stages of the music. Afterwards, it needs to be turned off, but it's a gradual process, and that's definitely a building block.
Well, it's great that you give them all the details, because it's so funny that practicing is like the place where all the work happens and where we spend most of our time, but it's kind of like a vague area where sometimes you'll go to an event or go to a teacher and they're like, okay, well, work on this. And they just kind of leave it at that, right?
Yeah, I think that people have to be told exactly how to work on something. I find that time spent at the piano can be very, very productive, or can be very, very unproductive if we don't have a specific short-term goal for every practice session. The pursuit of perfection in one practice session is a misnomer. We have to have little tasks that we can complete in each hour that may not be the finished product at that time, but will lead us to the finished product over a course of time.
And do you set, like, I know that it's more quality over quantity of hours, but do you set like an amount of time that you want your students to practice, or not at all?
I basically customize that according to what their goals are. For students that wish to participate in competitions and are preparing for an important recital, I would say that, at least 3 hours a day is necessary just to keep all the fine joints and technique working. Of course, that's catered to every student, and some students are not preparing for big competitions or big performances, and I would say that at that point we have to ascertain what the goal is and find a time that's suitable.
Yeah. So, of course, everyone worries about memorization of a piece and having it all solid so you can perform on stage without any sort of unexpected events happening. But when you're first having students start out memorization, do you make sure that they're doing that during the very first learning process, or do you not address that until later on when they have certain technical things down? How do you go about it?
I think that that's also a process and also individual for each student. I find that with most students, memorization happens naturally over a course of time if they're practicing properly. Having said that, I have certain ways to do certain pieces. For example, in a Bach fugue, I insist that the students first memorize each voice independently and play it for me by memory in a lesson. And then we go on to memorizing each hand separately. And then we go on to memorizing voice pairs and combinations. And then finally put everything together. And so for other things, if there's a specific memory problem in a certain passage, more often than not, the cause of it is one hand, either the left hand or the right hand, but mostly the left hand. And so in those places, I encourage them to play it for memory for me in a lesson so that I can check it. And the other culprit in all of this is the use of the pedal. Often the pedal hides all our mistakes, and we think it hides our mistakes, but
Yes.
it really doesn't. And taking the pedal out really forces us to know what the fingers and the hands are doing.
It can seem really overwhelming. Do you have a way of systematically breaking it up?
Absolutely. I divide the piece into sections, but I divide it beginning with section number 1 at the end of the piece. I find that memorizing backwards helps reinforce, because you're memorizing in reverse order and you're always going back to something that you know better, rather than starting from the beginning and always going to a new section that you don't have memorized.
Well, those are really, really good tips. I know that we always want to take the details in and not just go with the motor memory, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, memory has many components. There is the physical memory or the muscle memory, and then there is the auditory or oral memory, and then there there is the visual memory, and all three of those have to work in conjunction with each other in order to have the security on stage.
Well, that answers the 3 questions I had for you. So you're off to teach at Music Fest Perugia in Italy.
Yes, we're all really excited about it.
I've heard the students get to meet performers and teachers and even perform with orchestra, right?
Yes, we have students and teachers from all over the world, from some of the most famous schools in the world, like the Moscow Conservatory and the Juilliard School. And the students get a private lesson every day and get public performances of solo works, and also get an opportunity to play with our resident orchestra. So it's a great festival.
Well, I hope you have a wonderful time and a wonderful summer doing that. Now, if students or teachers want to see you giving a masterclass or speaking, are there any events that you have coming up that they can come to, or do you have a schedule of your upcoming appearances on your website, maybe?
There are appearances on my website for solo performances and some of the things the students are doing. In addition to that, I give a monthly masterclass at Fazioli Pianos in Richmond, which I know you came to visit just recently, and those will be starting up again in the fall.
Yes, I did come in. That was amazing. You had so many wonderful, insightful things to say, and I was trying to soak it all in. So yes, it's definitely worth it to come see one of your classes, and everybody should if they want to check out the schedule at Showcase Pianos in Richmond. And your website is starcevichstudio.com?
Yes, correct.
All right. Well, thank you very much again. I really appreciate all the answers that you've given us to your questions, and have a wonderful, wonderful time at Music Fest Perugia this year.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.